Take a great posture, your best posture of the day. Open up those shoulders. And with a bow, let's give it away with respect to one another. And action. So, I've been asked to talk about entrepreneurship and how to get going as an entrepreneur. And of course, I found a way to make it all about me and to depress my friend, my producer, Vanessa here, about that path. And I actually think from a serious point of view, it's incredibly helpful to be told not to start that path. And if you refuse after hearing everything you're about to hear to stop, then you should proceed. It's sort of like one of those video games like Zelda or Indiana Jones. Like, to proceed to the next level, you have to make it through this test. And unfortunately, in everything I've ever read about being an entrepreneur or watched movies about it, I've never really heard this. So I wanted to share this. And after even 30 seconds of this, you'll know why you've never heard it. Because it's depressing. But you know what's more depressing and far worse than that? Is not hearing it and going forward and 10 or 15 years later, or 5 years later, looking back and saying, God, I wish someone had told me about this. So what this is that the path of entrepreneurship, first of all, let's talk about what being an entrepreneur is. This means you have some idea. You're sitting over, you're watching Stranger Things on Netflix, and you're eating popcorn, and every single time there's 20 popcorn kernels at the bottom, and you're like, gosh, I wish there was some way to get those final 20 popcorn kernels. And you think, I'm going to invent a better popcorn popper. And you go to your local independent hardware store because you boycott Amazon and Home Depot, and you buy 20 popcorn makers and you test them all out. You're still not an entrepreneur. You're just figuring some stuff out. So you spend a couple $100, you buy 20 popcorn makers. They're all made in China and they all work slightly differently, but every single one, the best they ever get is there's 4 or 5 unpopped popcorn kernels at the bottom. And you're like, I can do this better. I can make them fluffier, blah, blah, blah. So you start researching convection and heat and funneling and whatever goes into a popcorn maker, and you hit upon your basic idea, you figure out some manufacturing, and then boom, you do a Kickstarter, you get investors, or you have your own money, or whatever the situation is, and you raise money and you start building your first, and then you figure out distribution, who's going to sell them, who's going to buy them, how much, and then to do all that, you have to hire an accountant, obviously, to keep track of the money and blah, 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 unless you're doing it yourself, which is always great. Keep your cash flow low. Then you hire some staff to help out with the distribution or the marketing or the whatever, or maybe you do it all yourself, which I prefer. But in any case, you'll need at some point to hire some great staff in certain areas. Once you do that, you need HR, you need some HR policies, you need some insurance, you have to pay this, you have to pay that. And before you know it, you are no longer an entrepreneur, you're a boss. And as a boss, when the company wins, everyone's happy. As a boss, when the company doesn't win, it's your fault. So just to repeat that, when things are great, everyone shares in that joy. When things are bad, it's your fault. And that's not a poor me notion. That really is how it works, and how it should work. The boss, like President Harry Truman had the thing on his desk that said, the buck stops here. The responsibility, the blame comes here. That said, being a boss is a very different path than being an entrepreneur, and usually those two skill sets don't overlap. An entrepreneur is like a wolf, and a boss has to be like the head of some big Scottish clan. Like, it's bigger than a family, and it's a little less close than a family, or a lot less close than a family, but it's got some sort of familial bond. So then you read a million books on being a boss and you become a mediocre boss, which is a huge improvement over being an awful boss. I'm speaking personally here. And then before you know it, it's been 5, 10, 15, 20 years that you've been doing this. And the first 5, 10, 1, whatever number, in my case, probably like 10 years, you were super broke and didn't pay yourself and were stressed out, and you went from like super young to looking like, Billy Crystal in Princess Bride with fake old age makeup all over you, or face app. And, you're lonely, you're singing Cry Me a River over a cliff at night, and, you've ruined your life. So that's sort of one path. A more frequent path for being an entrepreneur is you have your popcorn kernel idea, you get investors, you sell out within a year or two. And you never really cared that much about your mission. It was really more just you want to create something, have fun, work on your laptop, eat some cold pizza, learn a lot, and make a bundle of money after you sell out to whoever wants to buy your popcorn kernel maker. And that may sound cynical, but I've been around the natural products industry and many other industries, outdoor industry, almost every single company, with very few exceptions. I would say maybe 20 exceptions out of more than 2,000 companies at Natural Products Expo, which is the biggest event for the entire natural products industry. And that industry is like every product you'd ever see in Safeway or Whole Foods or whatever. Even Whole Foods has been bought out, obviously, by Amazon. So maybe only 20 out of 1,000 or 2,000 companies have any kind of integrity. And to 201, the companies with integrity are family owned or privately owned. They don't have investors. Why is that? Because I'll give you a personal anecdote, which is that when Elephant was young, we were a print magazine. We went national in Whole Foods and bookstores and all this. We had the first, I think, at that time, the first mainstream non-niche publication cover on gay rights. And we were told, and I know it was the first because number one, I hadn't seen any. It wasn't like Time Magazine or Newsweek saying, here's the situation with gay rights. Some people are for it and some are against. It was advocating for it. We were. And so we were told by one of our major distribution outlets, grocery chain, that we couldn't use that cover in that grocery. And the reason for that wasn't that they were bigoted jerks, it was because they were afraid. Their policy was we don't have sex, we don't have violence on magazine covers, and they considered advocating for gay marriage it was a very in-your-face kind of image, but it wasn't inappropriate sexually, at least in our minds. Anyway, they felt like that wasn't appropriate. If I had had a board with actual power and investors, they would have said, there's no way, Waylon, you're going to go forward with this magazine cover. I don't care how important you think it is. You're a yoga magazine. Why would you be doing a cover on gay rights in the first place? You're going to lose at least 40% of your distribution if you go into this grocery store and they say you can't do this cover. So no, you can't do it. And even if they said yes, because I had handpicked the board and tried to take control, I would be in the position of petitioning and asking for permission to do something risky. And that relationship, and I can tell you now because I have very powerful colleagues, dumbs down risk at its outset. The only way to do risk successfully is to come from a mission point of view. If you do risk from a careful point of view, you make the people who are afraid of the risk unhappy, and you make the riskers unhappy. You don't make anybody happy. You can't be John Kerry or Bill Clinton or Al Gore mincing their words, trying to not offend anybody and do anything important. They did lots of important things, those three gentlemen, but they also kind of were known for never having the strength of their own convictions when it came to controversy. So, circling back a long ways, there's a quote by Hugh MacLeod. He says, something like, choose carefully. If you're going to work as an employee in a big corporation, this is not what he says. He says, if you want to be a sheep, you will be bored. So it's not that, first of all, that's an offensive comparison. You can be in an office, you can be in a cubicle and not be a sheep, obviously. That said, I've had lots of friends in those situations, and there is some sort of office space truth to that, which is that cubicles aren't necessarily anyone's idea of Valhalla or joy, right? No one says, you know what, when I grow up, I want to have some plastic figurines on the top of my cubicle with a little plant. That would be so delightful. On the other hand, being an entrepreneur where you think, oh, I'm going to be on my cool, Apple Air and flying around and eating day-old pizza and like working 18 hours straight with cool colleagues bent over with furrowed brows, bent over my laptop, and we'll figure out cool stuff and then I'll make billions of dollars. All of that can be half true, just like the other analogy, but the truth is something different. And so Hugh MacLeod says, or you can be a wolf and you'll be lonely. So I always talk about what is it called? The blue zones. So the blue zones are these, I think 5 or so areas in the world where people live to 100 years. A lot of people live to 100 years. And they go to these areas and they say, what is so healthy about these areas? And one of the 5 qualities is nonstop community in an organic way. So it's not like calling someone and saying, hey Vanessa, let's hang out later. It's running into Vanessa at the cafe or whatever. So it's just organic. So you have nonstop, low level, organic social activity. A lot of that, in my experience, continues in my entrepreneurial path. I know everybody a little bit, I like to say. Or I often say, oh yeah, I've known you a little bit for a long time. I know so many people, or rather so many people know me in Boulder and in the many different areas I've worked in climbing, in natural products, in yoga, in Buddhism, in all these different areas that Elephant has touched on. But I don't know their names often. I definitely don't have their phone number. I would never call them up if I broke my leg on a trail and say, hey, can you take me to the ER? I really need a friend right now. If I called these people who I've known for 10 plus years and were like, hey, Waylon, it's very Austin Powers sometimes when I walk down Pearl Street. I'm like, hey, how's it going? What is up? Everyone's like, what's up, Waylon? And visitors think I'm super popular and they say, oh, mayor, blah, blah, blah. And that's actually an apt comparison because I could run for a low-level political office, but I couldn't get 10 people to come to my birthday party who were dear friends. So if that sounds sad, I think that's good because that's sort of the life of an entrepreneur. And yes, entrepreneurs can do it way better than I've done it. But what I have done is I didn't want to build something and sell out within a couple months. I wanted to build something that I actually cared about and devote my life to trying to be a benefit in my own way. And hopefully you want to do the same thing. I recommend the book Small Giants above all others for mindful businesses. Small Giants. By Burt Bacharach. Not really. I can't remember his name. He's amazing though. Oh, whatever. He's great. I've actually interviewed him and it was a huge honor. But I'm not known for my brains, just my looks. So, let's see. I'm trying to recover from my dad joke. So, yeah, the path can be very lonely. You can work forever. If you're not just going after money, you'll make hard decisions that can cost your bottom line. What's his name?
Bo Burlingham.
Bo Burlingham, Small Giants. Such a good book. Thank you, Vanessa. So the journey can be really hard. It can be really lonely. And at the end of the day, at the end of your career, basically, or in the middle of your career, you can, basically be going home and watching Netflix with Stranger Things. And, watching Stranger Things or Game of Thrones or whatever. And that can kind of be your life. You can whittle down your life while everyone else is coupling up and having children and, and that's its own challenge. And we've done other blogs and videos. We just did one on the difficulty of a relationship and communication. But the challenge of entrepreneurship is it can be a lonely path and it can actually kind of eat away at the foundation of a healthy life. So if you're willing to make that kind of sacrifice and you're willing to kind of stick to your guns mission-wise without selling out, either selling out in an ongoing way, like compromising your ideals all along the way, or selling out finally, like 2 years in, you go from being glass packaged organic, say nut butter or something, and you go to being plastic and, plastic little packets and non-organic. You could still be a good person, be a cool company, have great employees, people love you, but are you really being of benefit? Maybe in some ways you are, of course. And it's not that you're evil. This conversation can get so judgmental or extreme. But, we all have that It's a Wonderful Life moment where you come back and you say, who am I? Where did I lose my way? And I wish I could wake up and have undone this whole path I've walked down where I maybe haven't created a better, kinder society. So I love the entrepreneurial path, but there is loneliness in there. There is challenge. And may all of you who decide to walk that path do so far better than I did. Hopefully you'll listen to this and get a little sense of how to maintain community and maintain connections along the way. But again, that sounds easy, but one of the main qualities of being an entrepreneur, just like being a parent, is sacrifice. So I can't tell you how many times I've been invited to whatever, and I've literally like shaken my head in sort of remorseful chuckles, remorseful laughter, like not happy, being like, I can't do that. I just recently, I'll end with this, I recently found my old calendar from 10 years ago or 5 years ago popping up on my computer via Entourage, Microsoft. It was kind of weird. And I finally, because I don't use it, so I was opening up in notifications, so I finally went in and deleted everything that was on that calendar. And seeing my old shifts of working were insane. The last shift I think ended at 1 a.m. And then my first shift was at 9 a.m. And they went throughout the whole day. And it was, it was devastating to a normal life. On the other hand, it was wonderful for having an extraordinary life in certain ways, but in other ways, it really, it decimates your life. So parenthood, entrepreneurship, these are paths that shouldn't be walked into just looking at the kind of your idea from watching movies. You got to hear some real talk. Hopefully this has been somewhat helpful. And if you still want to do it and continue, I support you in that for what it's worth, because as long as you've heard the warning, it's fantastic to proceed. But I just don't want folks to proceed without hearing the warning first. So thank you so much. Take a great posture. And with respect to everyone listening in the whole world, may it be of benefit. Let's bow to one another.